Ooh, take a look at this. Tell me about yourself. Tell me about yourself. Have you ever been in a situation where someone said, tell me about yourself? Maybe you were in a job interview and the person who was interviewing you said, tell me about yourself. And you didn't know what to say. How do you answer this? Well, in this lesson, I'm going to teach you. Hey, if you like getting tips like this, I'd be so happy if you subscribe to my channel right down there. Okay, so, this, to be honest, is sort of an awkward question to answer. It's awkward because it's not even a question, right? A question has a question mark at the end, right? A question mark. This doesn't have a question mark. It's sort of like a command. Tell me about yourself, right? Tell me about yourself. It's a nice command. So, I think most people sort of feel a bit awkward, right? What do you want to know? What would you like to know? I think that's how most people answer that. They say, what would you like to know? What would you like to know? Because, your life is, tell me about yourself. Do you want to know about my work, my favorite food, what kind of car I drive? What do you want to know? Right? So I think most people say this. Now, this is good because this puts the ball back into their court. It puts the ball back into their court. What does this mean? Have you ever heard this idiom before? It puts the ball back into their court. Well, it's sort of like a tennis idiom. Okay, have you ever played tennis? I really like tennis. Okay, so here's a tennis court. Okay, let's say this is my side of the court and this is your side of the court. Now, we hit the ball back and forth, right? Back and forth. That's how tennis works. So if someone asks you a question and you don't really like the question or you don't know how to answer the question, then you can put the ball back into their court. Now they have the responsibility to do something with it, right? So now you don't have to do anything because you put the ball back into their court. So, if it's like a job interview or something, you could say, what would you like to know about me? What would you like to know about me? But maybe if it's a job interview, it might not be the best idea to put the ball back into their court. It might seem a little bit disrespectful. I don't know. It depends on the situation. I've been asked this in job interviews before. People say, tell me about yourself. What do you want to know? I think in most cases, I don't put the ball back into their court. I just try to talk about some things about me. So, you could say any of these things here, like work experience, education, hobbies, ambitions. Now, this is not asking about personal data, like your personal information. If I ask you, tell me about yourself, I'm not asking about your weight, like your height, your age, your religion. I'm not asking about those things, right? Especially if it's a job interview. I would say focus on these things here. You don't need to give, your personal information, like what kind of car you drive, right? So let's take a look at an example, how someone could answer this. Okay, you could say, well, I came to Canada in the fall of 2016 with my wife and 2 children. Since then, I've been working in the IT sector. My wife and I are hoping to buy a house this year and get more settled into Canadian life. In my free time, I enjoy cycling and hiking. Actually, right now I'm training for a triathlon, which takes place in Vancouver next month. So I'm really excited about that. Luckily, my family enjoys being outdoors as well. So we spent quite a bit of time out in the mountains every weekend, right? I think this would be a great answer if you were in a job interview, and someone asked you, tell me about yourself, you could just say some of these things like this. I think that would be a good answer. Now, if you're in like a casual setting, if you're at like a party or something, and someone says, tell me about yourself, well, then it's sort of the same. You could say, talk about your work, your education, your life, right? But it's more casual, so you don't need to worry. You could talk about anything. You could talk about your favorite music, right? You could say, well, I'm really into music. I really like playing guitar. Into means you like it. If you say, I'm really into music, that means you really like music. That's your hobby, right? So you could say, I really like playing guitar. I like listening to rock and roll, right? You could say, yeah, I really like movies as well. Most weekends I go to the theater to watch some movies. My favorite movie is Cinderella. I don't know. Is Cinderella even a movie? I don't even know if Cinderella is a movie. It's probably a movie. Your favorite sports. You could say, I'm really into football. I'm really into football. That means you really like football. You really, you like it. Maybe you play it, or maybe you watch it on TV, but you really like that. Now, remember, in Canada and the US, this is football. This is a football. Okay, so you throw the football through the air, and it spirals through the air. Okay, so this is the verb describing what the ball is doing, because when you throw a football, you put a spin on it, and it spirals through the air. Okay, so you could talk about these things just in a casual setting. What you like to do with your life. You could say, well, I like to hang out with my friends on the weekends. We go hiking, or we go, I don't know, whatever you do, you can talk about, right? So if someone says, tell me about yourself, and you don't really know how to answer, I would say the best thing is to put the ball back into their court. You can say, what would you like to know? What would you like to know? Then that forces the other person to be more specific, right? Then they can ask you more specific questions like, what do you do on the weekends? Or, what do you do for work? Right? Or what kind of car do you drive? Right? If they want to ask you specific questions about your car, hey, then they can ask you that. It's easier to answer, right? Now, sometimes people might say this, tell me your life story. Tell me your life story. Now, in a way, this is easier because, you can just start at the beginning, right? It's easier to answer because you know your life story, right? I was born in Brazil. When I was 5 years old, my family moved to Japan. Then we moved to Canada, and I graduated from high school in Canada, and then I went to Australia to study, a degree in medicine. I have a degree in medicine from Sydney University or something like that, right? It's a bit easier to answer because you can tell your life story in chronological order. Chronological order means by the order of time, right? So I was born in, and then you tell your whole life story up until now, up until right now. Now, you might want to say this, I'll tell you my life story in a nutshell. In a nutshell. That means briefly. Have you ever heard this word nutshell before? Think of like a walnut. Okay, do you know what a walnut is? It's like a nut, and you've got the shell, right? It's a very small, like if you say, I'm going to tell you my life story in a nutshell, that means it's like a summary. You're going to give the person just a short summary, right? Because if you would tell your real life story, it might take hours and hours. So, you don't want to waste everybody's time. You might just want to tell it in a nutshell. So that means you're going to answer very briefly, maybe in like 1 or 2 minutes. Okay, very short. I was born here. I went to university here. I work as a physiotherapist. I work as a physiotherapist, and I like to. Right now, I'm looking for a job, and I'd like to work in the field of medicine in the future. I don't know. So you can just sort of tell your life story in a nutshell. That means briefly. But hey, let's do some homework. I want you to tell me about yourself. Tell me about yourself. Put your answer down there in the comments, and I'll see you over in the next episode of Mad English TV. Take care.